500 shields. Since gold is too soft to provide protection, these were not used in battle, but were there to impress visitors. They were taken from the building only when displayed on special ceremonial occasions. From the hall, you moved into the throne room, the hall of justice, where Solomon met with his officers, settled disputes referred to him, and gave judgment according to governmental affairs. It was here he had his magnificent throne described in chapter 10. Solomon's living quarters, and we assume the queen's quarters, were behind the throne room. Of course, there were other entrances to various parts of the building, all of them protected by a special bodyguard, and Solomon had a private concourse that led from his residence to the temple. Next to the temple of the Lord, Solomon's palace must have been an impressive structure. Okay, then the verses in 1 Kings 9, we'll come back to that eventually, but 1 Kings chapter 9, verse 15 states this: "Now this is the account of the forced labor which King Solomon levied to build the house of the Lord, his own house, the mile of the wall of Jerusalem." So this states that Solomon's building projects included Milo, the wall of Jerusalem, Hazor, Megiddo, and Gezer. So I had this question here. What are your thoughts on Solomon's palace in contrast to the temple? Any thoughts on that? Pardon me? Elaborate, yes. Could we use a word like extravagant? Probably. Okay.
Did it have as much gold, though? His temple was more special, like jute stone, like
Yeah.
precious stone.
Yeah, he used kind of what was not used in the temple of all this that had been accumulated to build his own home or his own palace. Okay, and it's when you think about, okay, if you think about just the whole thing, you have the hall of the forest of Lebanon, and you have the judgment hall. I mean, just think about the throne that he sat on. Solid ivory, covered in gold. And then you have on either side these life-size lions, and you have 6 steps going down, and you have a lion on each step. And so you walk into this throne room, and you have all the stones, the precious stones, you have the gold, If you were coming for a visit, when you first walk in, what would your reaction be?
Very
Colorful, mm-hmm. Very impressive.
ornate.
It's ornate. Yes, definitely. And even using a word like a bit overwhelming, it would make you feel. How would it make you feel about yourself when you walk into this throne room? Intimidated, yes. And what if Solomon is sitting on the throne? Kind of, It would really humble you, wouldn't it? It would put you in your place, that's for sure. And you may have come in with something that you really wanted to get off your chest, okay? And you walk into that throne room, and I kind of have a feeling if it were me, I'd be totally deflated at that point. And I would not want to be at all aggressive in what I said, okay? I'd take a very lowly position. How long did it take him to build the palace and his home for himself and his Pharaoh bride? 13 years. How long did it take to build the temple? 7. Almost double the time. When you think about that, just the time, how does that ring with you?
Doesn't seem right.
No, it doesn't seem right. Any other thoughts?
The workers were worn out after building the temple, so
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yes. And it was forced labor, a lot of it. Okay.
You have an awful lot more to do, though. I think you've got 3 main buildings here, plus the wall, plus whatever he was doing in Megiddo and Giza had already been leveled.
Right. He rebuilds them. Yeah. Yeah, there's
I don't know how large the projects were in those, but
yeah, I mean, I don't know how much time that's true. Some of that time was spent on those projects as well over that 13-year period.
still it seems a long time for personal versus.
Yes, it almost rings that the palace took some kind of priority in his mind. He was definitely making a statement about, but officials from other countries coming in. But you think some of this was, okay, not just to feed his own pride, okay? But when dignitaries come into the court, how do you want them to feel and react?
How would I, or how would...
Yeah, if you were a dignitary, okay, Solomon builds all of this and you come in to have an audience with him, how does Solomon want you to feel when you walk in?
Yeah, like less of a person, like he's a bigger shot than you are. He's got more power,
Yeah,
and you're subservient to him.
right. Your nation obviously is not as worthy as his, okay? And you would hardly feel like you're an equal. Okay, you may be king of wherever, and he's king of Israel, but when you come into that palace, you would hardly be feeling like you're the king on the same level. Okay. Now, part of this could be simply because he wants to. Let's take the positive side here. He's trying to reveal the glory of God. Okay, because a lot of these people cannot go into the temple. Well, okay, they could go into the courtyard, okay, of the temple if they wanted to worship the true God. But the countries who had been subverted, okay, I'm sure that for the most part, they're not interested in worshiping God. So the only exposure they have to the glory of God is when they come to the palace and not the temple. Would that be a realistic statement?
Queen of Sheba, when she came, she said not even half has been told,
Yes.
but I've heard it's so much greater.
Yeah. The queen. In case people didn't hear it from home, the Queen of Sheba, when she came, she said, "This is much more than what I had thought. It's not. It's more. It's more than greater than half of what I. Am I saying that right? Twice as grand as I had anticipated or been told. You know, she said the half hadn't been told or something like that. Yeah. At any rate, moving on, the next section in 1 Kings 7, starting in verse 13. I'm just going to read the first couple verses here. Now King Solomon sent and brought Hiram from Tyre. Now this is not King Hiram, okay? Don't confuse this guy with King Hiram. He was a widow's son from the tribe of Naphtali, and his father was a man of Tyre, a worker in bronze, and he was filled with wisdom and understanding and skill for doing any work in bronze. So he came to King Solomon and performed all his work. So I thought I could read all these verses up to 51, right through the rest of the chapter, and you would kind of go, uh-huh. Yeah, it wouldn't have the same impact as seeing something. So I researched and I found a short video on YouTube. Excuse me. Just as a disclaimer, this video was put out by the Mormon Church. But as far as how it depicts the temple, I think it seems to be accurate or mostly accurate. Okay? So we're going to watch that. It's only 5 minutes long. Excuse me.
And it came to pass in the 480th year, after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, that he began to build the house of the Lord. And the house which King Solomon built for the Lord, the length thereof was 80 cubits, and the breadth thereof 20 cubits, and the height thereof 30 cubits. And the porch before the temple of the house, 20 cubits was the length thereof, according to the breadth of the house, and 10 cubits was the breadth thereof before the house. And for the house he made windows of narrow lights. And against the wall of the house he built chambers round about, 5 cubits high, and they rested on the house with timber of cedar. The nethermost chamber was 5 cubits broad, and the middle was 6 cubits broad, and the third was 7 cubits broad. For without in the wall of the house he made narrowed rests round about, that the beams should not be fastened in the walls of the house. The door for the middle chamber was in the right side of the house, and they went up with winding stairs into the middle chamber, and out of the middle into the third. And the house, that is, the temple before it, was 40 cubits long. And the oracle in the forepart was 20 cubits in length, and 20 cubits in breadth, and 20 cubits in the height thereof. And within the oracle he made 2 cherubims of olive tree, each 10 cubits high. And he set the cherubims within the inner house, and they stretched forth the wings of the cherubims, so that the wing of the one touched the one wall, and the wing of the other cherub touched the other wall, and their wings touched one another in the midst of the house. And he carved all the walls of the house round about with carved figures of cherubims, and palm trees and open flowers, within and without. And the whole house he overlaid with gold, until he had finished all the house. And for the entering of the oracle he made doors of olive tree. The lintel and side posts were 1/5 part of the wall. So also made he for the door of the temple posts of olive tree, 1/4 part of the wall. And the 2 doors were of fir tree. The 2 leaves of the one door were folding, and the 2 leaves of the other door were folding. And he carved thereon cherubims and palm trees and open flowers, and covered them with gold fitted upon the carved work. And Solomon made all the vessels that pertained unto the house of the Lord, the altar of gold, and the table of gold, whereupon the showbread was. And the candlesticks of pure gold, 5 on the right side, and 5 on the left, before the oracle, with the flowers and the lamps, and the tongs of gold. And he set up the pillars in the porch of the temple, and he set up the right pillar, and called the name thereof Jachin. And he set up the left pillar, and called the name thereof Boaz. And upon the top of the pillars was lily work. So was the work of the pillars finished. And he made a molten sea, 10 cubits from the one brim to the other. It was round all about, and his height was 5 cubits, and a line of 30 cubits did compass it round about. It stood upon 12 oxen, 3 looking toward the north, and 3 looking toward the west, and 3 looking toward the south, and 3 looking toward the east. And the sea was set above upon them, and all their hinder parts were inward. And it was an handbreadth thick, and the brim thereof was wrought like the brim of a cup, with flowers of lilies. It contained 2,000 baths. And he made 10 bases of brass. 4 cubits was the length of one base, and 4 cubits the breadth thereof, and 3 cubits the height of it. And on the borders that were between the ledges were lions, oxen, and cherubims. And every base had 4 brazen wheels, and the work of the wheels was like the work of a chariot wheel. Then made he 10 lavers of brass. One laver contained 40 baths. and upon every one of the 10 bases 1 laver. And he put 5 bases on the right side of the house, and 5 on the left side of the house. And he set the sea on the right side of the house eastward over against the south. So was ended all the work that King Solomon made for the house of the Lord.
John, maybe I should stay over it.
By all means.
So,
You
John
want-
sent me the link not knowing that it was,
You want this?
sure. So John sent me the link not knowing that it was connected to Brigham Young University's archaeological department. And when I saw the subtitle of the organization, it said Messengers of Christ. Well, if you're familiar with, if you're familiar with how the Latter-day Saints now work, they've been going around rechanging the names of their temples to Communities of Christ. And so when I saw Messengers of Christ, I thought, I wonder what that's connected to. So anyways, I searched for an hour and a half for an evangelical YouTube channel that would cover the King Solomon's Temple in 3D. And all I could find was Gaming 3D, King Solomon's Temple. And no words. It's just it's just video that rambles, that just rolls on for like 5 minutes without any explanation. So John had, when I explained to John what the basis of the video was, it's like, so how do we do some kind of presentation with this? So together we decided, okay, we're going to give the disclaimer that this is from the Mormons. We do not endorse the Mormons in any way, shape, or form. But the video is accurate. In fact, what they're reading from is the King James Version of the Bible verses as they're walking through the different sections of the construction. So John just wanted something that you could visually see so that you could understand the dynamic of it. But yeah, we want to be upfront about where did that video come from. So, all right.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you're a Christian, I'll say this, if you're a Christian and you have the ability to create technology by video, please do something. Because you'd be surprised, there's a lot of content that Christians would find very advantageous when it comes to that kind of creation content. And it's not produced by Christians. It's produced by other organizations. There's even one done by a Jewish Archaeology Institute in Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, so do we show that one? I mean, it's one bad faith is no better than the other bad faith, and yet they're using Old Testament history to explain a particular point. So we need more Christian texts that are graphic artists, designers, and YouTube creators to develop material that Christians can use to be able to understand what the material is in Scripture, historically.
Okay. Okay. You'll turn the light back on up here for me, just in case I'm in shadow for people watching at home. One comment just on the the bronze stands that you saw, the 10 stands with the bulls. They were really to support. They were used in the ceremonial washing by the priests. You can imagine with the volume of sacrifices coming through that area, you have the huge laver, okay, but that would not be adequate for the priests to wash themselves and the sacrifices. And so these other 10 were supplements to how do you say, keep things moving along, okay? All right. I just thought that was interesting to note, because that's different than the original tabernacle. Okay. And on page 121, I just commented here that The passage that I didn't read here, but we saw it in the video instead, details the furnishings of the temple. And we're only referencing this since our study is not centered on the temple, but on the kingship of Solomon. Though we've spent some time on this because it relates. And 2 Chronicles 3:4 spends less time on the details of the temple than 1 Kings. So why would the authors of 1 Kings, especially here chapter 7, and over in 2 Chronicles, go into so much detail about the temple?
It was a big deal at the time. I'm sure for hundreds of years after it was a big deal. People were very interested in it, and they couldn't always go to see it, and they wanted to know what was going on.
Okay. Why not just keep the tabernacle? Why not move the tabernacle from outside of Jerusalem into Jerusalem and just have this very plain place of worship? You have to think back to David's time, okay? David desired to build a temple. God endorsed it, but said that Solomon would be the one who would build it. So why would the Lord say, oh no, forget about a temple, we'll just continue with the tabernacle? Why would the Lord allow this or endorse this?
I believe it was his plan all along.
Yes,
God's plan all along, and it was to glorify him,
okay,
bring the glory upon himself.
okay, to bring glory to the Lord.
The tabernacle was a tent when they were traveling through the desert,
Yep,
and now they had the promised land, and they were situated where they were supposed to be.
yeah, it was intended to be a permanent place of residence. Yeah, when they were traveling, it was a temporary thing. You know, it was portable, okay? And when they get in the land, now here we have this splendiferous temple, okay? It reveals the glory of God. What's besides revealing the glory of God, what's the additional intent? You're from one of the nations around, and you hear about this glorious temple. What would you like to do?
I want to go see it.
I want to go see it, right? From God's perspective, why would he want you to come? Just to view this wonderful temple?
Well, you can hear about the God-man as well, right?
Yes.
There's a gospel per se, but you can still say there is a creator and a true God, a living God.
Yeah, you know, that would be the intent. That when you'd come, I would hope that you would engage in conversation with people who are in the courtyard or in the temple, around the temple, wherever, and that they would be presenting the truth of who God is, and he's worthy of our worship, and this displays his splendor. Okay? It's not just for show. It was actually to draw all the nations to God. That was Israel's job description, if you want to put it. They were to be a witness to all around them, okay, throughout the world. Okay, and we dealt with this last week. The Lord's not just criticism, but his confronting of the people when he went into the courtyard. What was the courtyard? It was a marketplace. It was supposed to be a place of prayer, a place to introduce people to God, but it had become, the whole temple had become commercialized. Okay? They were selling the sheep and the goats and the doves and whatever, and there was little true worship going on. Okay? And so the intent of the temple was to draw the nations, to draw people to God, to hear the truth, which Israel forgot about. They hoarded it to themselves. Okay. At any rate, let's move along. We're going to go into 1 Kings chapter 8. I'm going to read the first 11 verses. Now that the temple is built, this has to do with the ark. Then Solomon assembled the elders of Israel and all the heads of the tribes, the leaders of the fathers' households of the sons of Israel, to King Solomon in Jerusalem, to bring up the ark of the covenant of the Lord from the city of David, which is Zion. All the men of Israel assembled themselves to King Solomon at the feast in the month Ethanim, which is the 7th month. Then all the elders of Israel came, and the priests took up the ark. They brought up the ark of the Lord, and the tent of meeting, and all the holy utensils which were in the tent. And the priests and the Levites brought them up. And King Solomon and all the congregation of Israel, who were assembled to him, were with him before the ark, sacrificing so many sheep and oxen they could not be counted or numbered. Then the priests brought the ark of the covenant of the Lord to its place into the inner sanctuary of the house, to the most holy place, under the wings of the cherubim. For the cherubim spread their wings over the place of the ark, and the cherubim made a covering over the ark and its poles from above. But the poles were so long that the ends of the poles could be seen from the holy place before the inner sanctuary, but they could not be seen outside. They were there to this day. They are there to this day. There was nothing in the ark except the 2 tablets of stone which Moses put there at Horeb, where the Lord made a covenant with the sons of Israel when they came out of the land of Egypt. It happened that when the priests came from the holy place, the cloud filled the house of the Lord, so that the priests could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled the house of the Lord. And 2 Chronicles 5, verses 1 to 14 basically says the same thing. Okay? So we have the Ark of the Covenant brought to the temple from the tent that David had pitched for it. 2 Samuel 6:17 says, okay, so they brought in the ark of the Lord and set it in its place inside the tent which David had pitched for it, and David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. So when the ark was brought to Jerusalem, it was placed inside a tent, inside the city. Okay, the tabernacle, remember we talked about this before, the tabernacle was still outside of Jerusalem, but the ark had been brought in, and you remember the whole story of how the Philistines had taken the ark, and then it came back, and David tried to move it once, and a guy reached out and touched it when they weren't doing it the right way. First, the priests weren't bringing the ark, carrying the ark. It was put on a cart. That's the same way the Philistines had done it. And so if it's good for the Philistines, it's good for the Israelites, except they had the law that said, no, you can't do it that way. Okay. All right. The tabernacle equipment and furnishings were also brought and stored in the temple. So it does mention that in these verses. 2 Chronicles, I'm just going to pop over there. 2 Chronicles 5 says, they brought up the ark and the tent of meeting, and all the holy utensils which were in the tent. The Levitical priests brought them up. So the tabernacle, the original tabernacle, and all the furnishings that were in the tabernacle were also brought into Jerusalem to the temple along with the ark. Okay, so you're shutting down the tabernacle, basically. All right? The only piece of the original furniture that was kept in active service was the Ark of the Covenant. The temple was dedicated during the Feast of Tabernacles in the 24th year of Solomon's reign. So here we go. So he started the temple construction in the 4th year of his reign. It says that. We read that verse last week. And it took 7 years to build the temple, which he did first. Then there were 13 years for Solomon's palace and residences and the other places that were being repaired. So when you total that all up, you bring us up to the 24th year. So the dedication takes place excuse me, after Solomon's palace is built as well, which is interesting. I personally, and I see Vern shaking his head, you're probably thinking the same thing I is. Why did you wait till your palace was built before dedicating the temple? Another 13 years before it's actually dedicated. At any rate, why is it? I have this question. Why is it significant that the dedication and bringing of the ark to the temple take place during the Feast of Tabernacles? It could have been done at other times. What's significant about having it during this particular feast?
All the men of Israel were assembled there.
Okay, yes, it was a time when all Israel would assemble.
There's no
That's
excuse not to be there. You already knew that was happening and you had to be there.
right. Yes. Okay. There's that. That's a good point. Any other thoughts before I tell you what I wrote down? Okay. First of all, the ark. What was okay? When the nation of Israel moved in the wilderness, what led the way? Okay, there was the pillar, the cloud by day, and the fire by night. But what was out in front? The Ark of the Covenant was out in front. The priests and the ark led the way. So here we have, and Tabernacles was reminding the Israelites of what? The walking in the desert, their wanderings. The Feast of Tabernacles was a reminder of their wanderings from Egypt until they gained the Promised Land. And it was to remind them of that. And the ark, leading them all the way to the Promised Land, signified the presence of God with them. Now the ark is moved into the temple, which signifies God's presence with his people in this new dwelling place. Okay? And what did God do to solidify that in their minds? The priest took the ark into the Holy of Holies, and then what happened?
We filled it with a cloud.
Yes, the presence of God with the cloud filled the temple. Okay? So it was like, because all of Israel is assembled, and it's during the Feast of Tabernacles, and they're being reminded of their wanderings, okay? And the ark was the one, it was out front leading them. Now the ark is brought in to the temple into a permanent establishment, okay? And then the glory of God fills the temple, and so it would put God's stamp of approval on this, that everyone would accept this, okay? There are always going to be, as we have in our lives too, is, you always have the naysayers amongst you, don't you? Like, well, the tabernacle was good enough for me. I'm not sure why we have to spend all this money on this thing, right? I guess because of human nature, I figure there are always those who will question why we, it's kind of, we do this in our culture, and my wife and I talk about this whenever we see a sports program or something. Are these athletes worth that kind of money? We could be feeding the poor. Okay? They're getting their millions while people are living on the streets. Okay, I don't need to go there. At any rate, so this would solidify in people's hearts and minds that this is the permanent residence now, okay, for God dwelling with them. It's interesting here, these passages in 1 Kings 8 and 2 Chronicles 5, the word house is used 26 times in the 1 Kings passage and 37 times in 2 Chronicles 5 to 7. So this is referred to not just the temple, but God's house. Okay, so when we think of house or home, what do we associate with that? Where you're at rest. Okay? Other things about your home? What it is to you, what it means to you? Where you live. Okay? Security. Yeah. We feel safer in our homes than we do out. Okay? It also has the idea of family. Right? And so when you talk about this being God's house, it's a place of rest, it's a place of safety, it's a place of refuge, it's security, it's family. So and the fact that it says house, it refers, God's here, but all of you are welcome into my house, which signifies family, okay, of belonging. I wrote here, the Jews have their roots in Abraham, Moses, and David. King David is mentioned 12 times, and Moses 3 times. And when we get to Solomon's prayer, which we won't be doing this evening, that's going to be the first thing in the fall, he mentions God's covenant with his father, 2 Samuel 7. And to the covenant God made with Moses, recorded in Deuteronomy 28 to 30. What makes the temple the house of the Lord was the presence of the Lord God Jehovah in the sanctuary. The priest placed the ark before the large cherubim that Hiram had made. That's in 2 Chronicles 3, 10 to 13. I'm just going to pop over there. 2 Chronicles 3, 10 to 13. Says, then he made 2 sculptured cherubim in the room of the Holy of Holies and overlaid them with gold. The wingspan of the cherubim was 20 cubits. The wing of one of 5 cubits touched the wall of the house, and its other wing of 5 cubits touched the wing of the other cherub. The wing of the other cherub of 5 cubits touched the wall of the house, and its other wing of 5 cubits was attached to the wing of the first cherub. The wings of these cherubim extended 20 cubits, and they stood on their feet facing the main room. Okay, we'll stop there. All right. And so the wingspan of the cherubim spanned the width of the Holy of Holies. These cherubim differ from the original ones placed upon the ark in the tabernacle. Turning to page 123, I came across this and I thought it was worthy of putting it in here. There's some interesting information about the cherubim in the Holy of Holies in the temple. It's interesting that, and I was going to mention this, when you saw the cherubim there in the video, is that what you'd expect cherubim to look like? No. Do you have an idea what they should look like? Do we know what they look like? We really don't. We have description of them with their wings, okay? And the fact now that it says, and it's in the scripture, it says they stood on their feet, okay? So we really don't know what they look like, and we could question what was in there in the video. Okay, I wrote down here, or it does say here, does not explain for certain the form or nature of the cherubim, except that they have faces and wings. They are turned toward each other with their outstretched wings spread over and screening the ark cover. There are 2 of them arising out of the ark cover at each end and made from the same slab of pure gold. These are the originals, okay? Their dimensions are small. The cover, like the ark itself, measures only 2.5 by 1.5 cubits. A cubit, again, is like 18 inches, okay? A cubit may be taken as I wrote it right there. Anyway, Solomon's temple followed the formal plan of the tabernacle, though its length and breadth were exactly double. Over the temple ark, there were cherubim with faces and wings, but they are not identical with the cherubim in the tabernacle. It says, and in the sanctuary he made 2 cherubim of olive wood, each 10 cubits high, and 5 cubits was, I'll read it anyways. And 5 cubits was the one wing of the cherub, and 5 cubits the other wing of the cherub. From the uttermost part of the one wing unto the uttermost part of the other were 10 cubits. And the other cherub was 10 cubits. Both the cherubim were of one measure and one form. The height of the one cherub was 10 cubits, and so it was of the other cherub. And he set the cherubim within the inner house, and the wings of the cherubim stretched forth, so that the wing of the one touched the one wall, and the wing of the other cherub touched the other wall, and their wings touched one another in the midst of the house. And he overlaid the cherubim with gold. These cherubim, unlike those in the tabernacle, were not part of and arising out of the ark cover, but stood independently. The chronicler is explicit that they stood upon their feet. They were of massive proportions, 10 cubits high. Their wings extended from wall to wall, meeting in the middle to provide, as it were, a canopy for the ark. Their posture comments the is in contrast to the drooping protective wings of the ancient Oriental art, and the independence of the Solomonic cherubs from those visualized in the latter literature is to be insisted upon. Note that again, their precise form is not described, but once more, there are 2 of them, and they are guardians of the ark. What had happened to the original ark with its cherubim at each end of the cover? We know that though most of the temple equipment was new, the original ark was retained. Yet there is no suggestion anywhere that the new cherubim were supplementary to the first set. Hence, something must have befallen the first set in the meantime. It would therefore appear that sometime during the reign of Solomon and prior to the erection of the temple, or more probably at some stage during the long period in which the ark wandered from place to place, the original cherubim had been broken off or otherwise removed and subsequently lost. Because it only mentions the ark coming in to the Holy of Holies, and then you have the new cherubim. Okay. The tabernacle equipment and furnishings were also brought and stored in the temple. And I read that in 2 Chronicles 5:5. But the ark is the only piece continuing in active service. 1 Kings mentions the priests assembling in the temple, but 2 Chronicles 5, verses 11 to 13, I'm just going over there to get that. It says, when the priests came forth from the holy place, for all the priests who were present had sanctified themselves without regard to divisions, and all the Levitical singers, Asaph, Heman, Jeduthun, and their sons and kinsmen, clothed in fine linen, with cymbals, harps, and lyres, standing east of the altar, and with them 120 priests blowing trumpets, in unison when the trumpeters and the singers were to make themselves heard with one voice to praise and glorify the Lord. And when they lifted up their voice, accompanied by trumpets and cymbals and instruments of music, and when they praised the Lord, saying, He indeed is good, for His loving kindness is everlasting, then the house of the Lord, was filled with a cloud, so that the priests could not stand to minister before because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled the house of God. So that's a little different than what's recorded in First Kings. Where have we encountered the glory cloud before? Okay, when Moses was on the mountain. Okay. I'm going to have somebody read a couple verses here. Okay. Jeremy, if you would. I'm getting a little hoarse. Numbers 9, verses 15 to 23. And let's see. Mark, would you do Exodus 40, verses 34 and 35?
Yep.
Exodus 40.
Numbers 9:15 to 23.
Yes, please.
Now on the day that the tabernacle was erected, the cloud covered the tabernacle, the tent of the testimony, and in the evening it was like the appearance of fire over the tabernacle until morning. So it was continuously. The cloud would cover it by day, and the appearance of fire by night. Whenever the cloud was lifted from over the tent, afterwards the sons of Israel would then set out. And in the place where the cloud settled down, there the sons of Israel would camp. At the command of the Lord, the sons of Israel would set out, and at the command of the Lord, they would camp. As long as the cloud settled over the tabernacle, they remained camped. Even when the cloud lingered over the tabernacle for many days, the sons of Israel would keep the Lord's charge and not set out. If sometimes the cloud remained a few days over the tabernacle, according to the command of the Lord, they remained camped. Then, according to the command of the Lord, they set out. If sometimes the cloud remained from evening until morning, when the cloud was lifted in the morning, they would move out. Or if it remained in the daytime and at night, whenever the cloud was lifted, they would set out. Whenever it was 2 days or a month or a year that the cloud lingered over the tabernacle, staying above it, the sons of Israel remained camped and did not set out. But when it was lifted, they did set out. At the command of the Lord, they camped, and at the command of the Lord, they set out. They kept the Lord's charge according to the command of the Lord through Moses.
Interesting. You ever paid much attention to that passage before? It's interesting that when you think of Israel's wanderings for those 40 years, they had God's presence with them over the tabernacle or leading them the whole time. And yet when you think of what they were like during those years, I get a little baffled, I guess, in my own mind, thinking if you're aware that God's presence is with you, wouldn't that influence how you live your life? And whether you decide to complain, maybe, about the poor rations of food or the lack of water or bathing facilities or trees or whatever.
We're even more blessed. We're indwelt by the Holy Spirit, and we complain all the time. So
Hey, no, that's a good point. Excellent point. Excellent point. Very
I always
true.
thought they were always on the move, though. But here it says that if you told them to stay for a year, they would stay.
Yes.
It never occurred to me that when they were wandering for 40 years, there would be periods of a year where they didn't wander.
Right. Yeah.
That would be frustrating.
Yeah.
By day 340, you're thinking,
Yeah. Yeah. Why are we still here?
yeah.
Yeah. When you think, I mean, where were they wandering? You're familiar with the Sinai Peninsula? Okay. Right. Like, hey, we're going nowhere. you know. But then sometimes they traveled at night. Okay, when the cloud lifted, then the ark was lifted up by the priests, and they went out in front, and then the tribes had their order that they were to go in, okay, behind the ark, and follow the ark, and they would have the pillar to guide them, the pillar of fire, to guide them when they traveled by night. Very interesting. And as Diane mentioned, we also have the cloud when Moses was up on the mountain, okay, and God was there. All right. So now Israel could see the glory of the Lord in the temple, where he had been with them, had shown himself as a cloud during the wanderings, but he hadn't actually been over the tabernacle when they were over these past years. Okay, so now God is coming back or appearing to his people again. Okay, The presence of God's glory was the distinguishing mark of the nation of Israel, setting it apart from other nations and other gods. Let's see. Oh, I didn't have Mark read his verses, please. Exodus 40, 34 and 35.
Then the cloud covered the tabernacle of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And Moses was not able to enter the tabernacle of meeting, because the cloud rested above it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle.
Okay, so here when they were, when they had the tabernacle, then not just when it would be over the tabernacle. Okay. Some other verses here. Exodus 33. Jim, can you find that for me and read this for me? It's a long passage, but Exodus 33, 12 to 23. You mind? And Vern, Romans 9, 4. You have it, Vern? You have. Go ahead and read it then.
Romans 9:4. For Israelites, to whom pertaineth the adoption, and the glory, and the covenants, and the giving of the law, and the service of God, and the promises.
Okay, so here is the. It says the glory. Mention the glory in there. Okay, Exodus 33, verse 12 to 23.
Then Moses said to the Lord, See, you say to me, bring up this people, but you yourself have not let me know whom you will send with me. Moreover, you have said, I have known you by name, and you have also found favor in my sight. Now therefore I pray you, if I have found favor in your sight, let me know your ways, that I may know you, so that I may find favor in your sight. Consider too that this nation is your people. And he said, My presence shall go with you, and I will give you rest. And he said to him, If your presence does not go with us, do not lead us up from here. For how then can it be known that I have found favor in your sight? I am your people. Is it not by your going with us, that I and your people may be distinguished from all the other people who are on the face of the earth? The Lord said to Moses, I will also do this thing of which you have spoken, for you have found favor in my sight, and I have known you by name. Then Moses said, I pray you, show me your glory. And he said, I myself will make all my goodness pass before you, and will proclaim the name of the Lord before you. And I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and will show compassion on whom I will show compassion. But he said, You cannot see my face, for no man can see me and live. Then the Lord said, Behold, there is a place by me, and you shall stand there on the rock. And it will come about while my glory is passing by, that I will put you in the cleft of the rock, and cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will take my hand away, and you shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen.
Okay, thank you very much. I have here the sins of God's people had caused the glory of God to depart from the tabernacle. I'm going to read some verses from 1 Samuel chapter 4, verses 19 to 22. Okay, this has to do with Eli and his family. It says, Now his daughter-in-law, Phinehas' wife, was pregnant and about to give birth. And when she heard the news that the ark of God was taken, this is by the Philistines, and that her father-in-law and her husband had died, she kneeled down and gave birth, for her pains came upon her. And about the time of her death, the women who stood by her said to her, Do not be afraid, for you have given birth to a son. But she did not answer or pay attention, and she called the boy Ichabod, saying, The glory has departed from Israel, because the ark of God was taken, and because of her father-in-law and her husband. She said, the glory has departed from Israel, for the ark of God was taken. So from that point on, when the Philistines took the ark, God's glory never showed itself again at the tabernacle until now. It's a long period of time, okay? Because of the sins of the people. Okay. God had promised to bring Israel out of Egypt. A few verses here we're going to look at real quickly. Exodus 12:40. Says, now the time that the sons of Israel lived in Egypt was 430 years. And at the end of 430 years, to the very day, all the host of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. And then Israel would settle in the land of Canaan and build a house for him. Exodus 15:17. Says, you will bring them and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, the place, O Lord, which you have made for your dwelling, the sanctuary, O Lord, which your hands have established. Karen, you had mentioned that this had always been in God's plan. And here we have a verse that says there was going to be a dwelling for the Lord in the land that Israel was promised. Okay, so we're not talking about a temporary tabernacle. It talks about a dwelling. And when you talk about a dwelling, it has a foundation. Okay? All right. Deuteronomy 12. And 11. Let's see if I can get where I'm supposed to be here. Oh, back up. When you cross the Jordan and live in the land which the Lord your God is giving you to inherit, and he gives you rest from all your enemies around you, which happened during David's reign and now in Solomon's, so that you live in security, then it shall come about that the place in which the Lord your God will choose for his name to dwell, there you shall bring all that I command you, your burnt offerings and your sacrifices, your tithes and contribution of your hand, and all your choice votive offerings, which you vow to the Lord. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God, you and your sons and daughters, your male and female servants, and the Levite who is within your gates, since he has no portion or inheritance with you. Okay. They didn't have land, basically. Okay. So here we have it talking about this is prophetic. Okay? That's why it just thought came to me. It's so important for us to study all of Scripture to understand God's mind. Okay? And that the whole thing with the temple, the tabernacle, now the temple, was in God's mind way back before he ever talked to David about it. Where did David get the desire to build a temple? From the Lord. The Lord put that thought in his mind, and then he wanted to proceed to do it, and God says, oh no, just a minute, hold on, don't get too excited yet. You can amass all the materials, but you're not the one building it, okay? And so here we have one of the first indications of that promise that came down through David. And then going over to chapter 16, verse 2. You shall sacrifice the Passover to the Lord your God from the flock and the herd in the place where the Lord chooses to establish his name. Okay, when we think about the place where the tabernacle was built, okay, tell me again, where was the tabernacle built? Not the tabernacle, temple, sorry. On Mount Moriah. What's our encounter with, what's so important about Mount Moriah? What's one of our first introductions to Mount Moriah? Yes, where Abraham took Isaac to offer him. Isn't it interesting that the place to worship God, here we have Abraham, the father of the nation, on Mount Moriah sacrificing. Of course, then you have, coming way down here, you have the Lord, okay, being sacrificed. And then through David, remember we talked about the fact that David had counted the people, and he suffered the consequences. God brought a plague, right? And so he offered sacrifice, he confessed and he offered sacrifices to the Lord at this place. And then the Lord, through David, made it clear that this was the place where the temple would be built. In my mind, it boggles my mind that the places of sin and grace and mercy all tie together. Okay, then going over to 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 12 and 13. It says here, "When your days are complete and you lie down with your fathers, I will raise up your descendant after you, who will come forth from you, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever." Referring to Solomon, of course. And I thought this is interesting as a closing remark for our lesson for this evening and this time we've had these last weeks. God keeps his promises in his time. And many times we become impatient, don't we? Oh, can't we just move this thing along? Lord, haven't we had enough of all this corruption in the world? And the Lord is saying, in my time, when everything is the Lord came at exactly the proper time. It said exactly in the fullness of time, the Lord came. It was the perfect time to have the once for all sacrifice. And so here now we have Israel at this point worshiping the Lord in the temple with God's presence back with his people. And when we pick it up in the fall, we're going to pick it up right after that. And where we have Solomon's opening remarks at the dedication and then his prayer, okay? And it is quite remarkable, okay? So if you want to, before we get together again sometime in September, you could read ahead through the rest of 1 Kings and 2 Chronicles 6 even, and get a sense of what Solomon says, how he prays, okay? And our time is done. All right, thank you for coming out.
Thank you, John.
You're quite welcome.